You're too poor to be wearing this." The words cut through the anniversary hall like broken glass, loud enough to turn heads, quiet enough to humiliate. My sister smiled when she said it, sweet, practiced, lethal, her fingers brushing the collar of my jacket as if checking its price. Laughter followed, polite, cruel. My parents didn't stop her. They didn't look at me at all. That was the moment I finally understood what I had lost, and what I would take back. The hall glowed with gold and white lights celebrating 40 years of marriage. Crystal glasses clinked. Old money laughed easily. I stood near the back, half hidden by a marble pillar, wearing the only suit I owned, tailored years ago, still sharp, still mine. But to them, I was already invisible. My sister, Clara, stood at the center of everything. Diamond earrings. Silk dress. The heir, the chosen one. Our parents had announced it an hour earlier, during the toast. My father's voice trembled, not with guilt but pride. "We've decided," he said, raising his glass, "to give the family inheritance to Clara. She understands responsibility. Legacy? No one asked about me. No one mentioned that the inheritance was meant to be split. No one mentioned that I was the one who had worked 2 jobs through college, while Clara vacationed. No one mentioned the nights I slept in my car when they cut me off. To teach me humility. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I swallowed it in silence. The kind of silence that burns. When Clara leaned in and whispered that line, "You're too poor to be wearing this," I met her eyes and smiled. Because she was wrong. I wasn't poor. I was patient. Years earlier, when they pushed me out, I learned something valuable. When you have nothing, you see everything. I built quietly. I invested quietly. I failed, learned, rebuilt. No family name, no safety net. Just grit and time. And the estate, the one they bragged about all night, was bleeding money. I knew because I'd been watching it for 2 years. The vineyard, the house, the land that had defined our family for generations. Mismanaged, overleveraged, one bad season away from collapse. My parents didn't see it. Clara didn't care. She saw prestige, not numbers. When the applause died down, my mother finally noticed me. "You came," she said, surprised, as if I were a distant cousin. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied softly. Clara laughed. "Of course not. This is the closest you'll ever get to the estate again." She had no idea. The party went on. Music rose. Speeches blurred. I slipped out before dessert, unnoticed. The same way I had learned to live. 3 months later, the estate went into foreclosure, quietly, painfully, desperately. Clara called me once. I let it ring. My father called twice. I answered the 3rd time. "We just need time," he said. "If you have anything, connections, advice, I'm sure Clara understands responsibility," I said and hung up. The auction was small. Private, no press, no family invited. I wore the same jacket. When the final bid was called, the room went still. To me, I didn't feel joy, just calm. The kind that comes when a storm finally breaks. The next time my family saw me was at the estate gates. They stood outside, my parents older, smaller, Clara pale, furious, while movers carried boxes past them. The deed was already filed. Final, Clara's voice cracked. "You can't do this. This is ours." "It was," I said. "You gave it away, just not to who you thought." My father said nothing. Clara looked at my jacket again. Same one, different meaning. "You planned this?" she whispered. "No," I said. "You did." I just listened. I didn't throw them out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult them. I let silence do the work. They left with what they brought, nothing of value. That night, I walked the estate alone. The halls echoed. The walls remembered everything. I stood where we once played as children, where promises were made and broken. I didn't reclaim my past, I replaced it. Weeks later, the anniversary hall hosted another event. Smaller, quieter. I attended. Clara was there too, invited by someone else. She avoided my eyes. The room buzzed when I entered. People whispered now for a different reason. She finally approached me, voice low. "You didn't have to humiliate us." "I didn't," I said. "I just stopped protecting you from the truth." She looked at my jacket one last time. Didn't say a word. And for the first time in my life, neither did I feel the need to explain who I was, or what I was worth. The silence after her words stayed with me longer than the echo of the hall. I watched Clara retreat into the crowd, Her shoulders stiff, her smile gone. People who once orbited her now glanced at me with curiosity, calculation. That was the real inheritance, attention shifting like a tide. But revenge isn't complete when it's loud. It's complete when it's permanent. I returned to the estate before dawn the next morning. Fog clung to the vines like a secret that refused to leave. I walked the rows slowly, fingers brushing leaves my father once taught me to prune. I remembered his voice, sharp when he was disappointed, warm when he needed something. I remembered my mother's silence, the kind that chose sides without words. Memory hurt, but it also clarified. I didn't want to destroy the estate. I wanted to make it undeniable. I hired new managers within a week, people who didn't know my last name, only my expectations. We audited everything, every hidden debt, every backroom deal Clara had signed without reading. Each discovery felt less like anger and more like vindication. The truth had weight. Numbers didn't lie, people did. The first letter from my parents arrived 2 weeks later. Handwritten. My mother's script trembled across the page. Apologetic without admitting fault. She asked for a meeting, I didn't reply. The second letter came from my father. Short, direct. He wanted to talk like adults. I scheduled the meeting at the estate. They arrived together, dressed carefully, as if presentation might still sway me. Clara wasn't with them. That told me everything. We sat in the old dining room, sunlight pouring across a table polished by generations. I poured water, nothing stronger. This wasn't a celebration. My father spoke first. You blindsided us. I didn't answer. You could have come to us. My mother said, we're family. I finally looked up. Family doesn't announce disinheritance like a party favor. They flinched. Good. My father leaned back, anger leaking through his restraint. You've made your point. Sell it back. We'll make it right, I smiled, just slightly. You already did. You showed me exactly what this place was worth to you. Silence swallowed the room. I stood. I didn't buy this to punish you. I bought it because you never believed I could. They left without another word. News traveled faster after that. The estate's revival made headlines, quietly at first. A struggling legacy reborn under new ownership. People asked questions. Old friends reached out. Investors circled. This time I answered. Her voice was thinner now, stripped of its silk. You're enjoying this? No, I said. I'm finishing it. She exhaled sharply. You always needed to win. I paused. No, I needed you to stop pretending I was nothing. She laughed bitterly. You think this makes you better than us? I think it makes me honest. She hung up. Months passed. The vines thrived. The house filled with light again. I hosted tastings, charity events. People who once ignored me now waited for my approval. It was almost funny how quickly respect followed ownership. Almost. One evening, after the last guests left, I found Clara sitting on the steps outside. No makeup, no entourage. Just her in a single suitcase. I have nowhere else to go, she said without looking up. I studied her, the sister who once measured my worth by my clothes, who took my future with a smile. You can stay? I said finally. In the guest house. Temporarily. She looked up, shocked. Because revenge doesn't need to look like cruelty. I replied. It needs to look like clarity. She nodded slowly, ashamed. Living near her was harder than I expected. I heard her cry at night. I watched her struggle with irrelevance, with the loss of a life she thought was guaranteed. I didn't comfort her. I didn't mock her. I let reality speak. My parents visited less and less. The distance between us became official, documented not by lawyers but by absence. Holidays passed quietly. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. 1 year to the day after the anniversary, I hosted a gathering at the estate. Not a celebration, a closing. Clara stood beside me as guests arrived, humble now, careful. My parents came late. They looked around, saw what the estate had become, what I had built. My father finally approached me. His voice was low. You did what we couldn't. I met his eyes. No. I did what you wouldn't let me. He nodded once. That was all. As the night ended and the last car disappeared down the drive, I stood alone beneath the stars. The estate was quiet, alive, mine. I thought about that moment in the anniversary hall. The laughter. The insult. The way they thought poverty was measured by fabric instead of sacrifice. They were wrong. Poverty is believing love must be earned. I turned out the lights, locked the doors, and walked forward, wearing the same jacket, carrying nothing from them except the lesson they never meant to teach me. Silence, when used wisely, is the loudest revenge of all. The estate didn't sleep after that night. It breathed. The walls creaked softly as if adjusting to a new spine, one finally strong enough to hold everything together. I stayed awake until morning, walking the corridors, touching frames that once held portraits of people who believed blood was ownership. I took those portraits down one by one. Not out of anger. Out of truth. I replaced them with nothing. Bare walls, space. Room to decide what deserved to stay. Clara tried to make herself useful. She asked questions. She offered help with events. She moved carefully, like someone learning gravity again. People were polite to her now, but politeness is colder than cruelty. It reminds you exactly where you stand. One afternoon, I found her in the vineyard, hands dirty, knees bent, struggling to tie a vine the way our father once taught us. She was doing it wrong. Like this, I said, kneeling beside her, guiding her fingers. She froze, then nodded. We worked in silence. After a while she spoke. I thought the world owed me comfort. I didn't look up. It owes no one anything. She swallowed. I used to think you were weak because you left. I tied off the vine. I left because staying would have made me disappear. She said nothing after that. Word of the estate's turnaround reached places I didn't expect. Banks that once dismissed my calls now invited me to private dinners. Business magazines requested interviews. I declined most of them. I wasn't interested in applause. I was interested in permanence. Then came the offer. A development group. Old money, colder smiles, wanted to buy the land. Triple what I paid. A legacy-ending sum. Enough to erase everything that came before. They assumed I'd say yes. I invited them to the estate. We walked the grounds as the sun dipped low, the vines casting long shadows like veins across the soil. They talked numbers. Expansion. Luxury resorts. My name engraved on plaques. When they finished, I said quietly, "You're standing on the only place I ever lost everything." They exchanged glances. "I'm not selling," I said. "Some things aren't assets." They left confused, slightly afraid. That night, my mother called. I hadn't heard her voice in months. "I heard about the offer," she said carefully. "I'm sure you did. You could finally be free," she added. "Free of all this?" I closed my eyes. "I already am." She hesitated. "Do you hate us?" The question was almost innocent. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't need you anymore." She cried softly. I waited. Then she hung up. That was the last time she called. Seasons changed. The estate flourished. I hired locally. Built scholarships quietly, anonymously for kids who reminded me of myself, hungry. Unseen, stubborn. I never told my story. I let results speak. Clara found work in town. Real work. She came home tired, humbled. Sometimes she ate dinner with me. Sometimes she didn't. We learned a new distance, one that didn't bleed. One winter evening she stood at the doorway to my study. "I'm leaving," she said. I nodded. "Where?" "Anywhere that doesn't know our name." I smiled, genuinely this time. "Good." She hesitated. "You won, you know?" I shook my head. "This isn't about winning." She looked at me, finally seeing it. "It's about choosing." "Yes." She left the next morning. No goodbye speech, just a note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry I learned too late." I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not forgiveness. Just closure. Years passed. The estate became a reference point, not for wealth but for integrity. People spoke of it with respect. Of me with curiosity. I kept my jacket. I never upgraded it. I didn't need symbols anymore. On the anniversary of that night, the insult, the laughter, I returned to the same hall. It was hosting a smaller event now. Simpler. I stood near the back again, not hiding, just observing. Someone brushed past me and whispered, "That jacket, classic." I smiled to myself. No one knew who I was. And for the first time, that felt like power. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I realized something simple and devastatingly clear. They thought they took my inheritance. But what they really gave me was distance. And in that distance, I built a life so solid that no one could ever take it from me again. I walked away without looking back. Not because I was done remembering, but because I no longer needed revenge to remind me who I was. The hall doors closed behind me with a soft, final sound, and for a moment I stood on the steps, breathing in the cold air as if it were something earned. I thought that would be the end of it. A clean ending. A story finished properly. But revenge has echoes, and echoes return when you least expect them. It happened on an ordinary morning. No anniversaries, no symbolism. Just rain tapping against the windows of the estate as I reviewed contracts at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Is this my son? My father's voice had aged. It cracked around the words like dry wood under pressure. I didn't answer right away. I don't have much time, he continued. Doctors say weeks, maybe less. Silence stretched between us, heavy and familiar. There are things I need to say, he whispered. Things I should have said before. I closed my eyes. Come to the estate, I said finally. If you're strong enough? He came 3 days later, alone. He walked slower now, leaning on a cane, his once commanding posture folded inward by time and regret. When he stepped inside, he stopped, looking around as if the house itself were judging him. You changed it, he said. No, I replied. I saved it. We sat across from each other at the same dining table, where he once tried to buy me back with words. His hands trembled as he rested them on the wood. I failed you, he said, blunt and unshielded. I thought discipline meant distance. That favoritism was love dressed as opportunity. I said nothing. Confessions don't erase consequences. I told myself you'd be fine, he continued. That you were strong enough not to need us. That Clara needed more. He laughed weakly. I was wrong on both counts. Rain streaked the windows like tears the house refused to shed. I didn't ask you here for forgiveness, he said. I know I don't deserve it. I came because I needed to see what you became without us. I met his eyes. You're looking at it? He nodded slowly. You surpassed me? The words landed heavier than any apology. He reached into his coat and pulled out an old envelope, yellowed, fragile. This was meant for you, he said. Years ago. Your grandfather left it. I kept it, because if you read it, you might have left sooner. I took the envelope. My name was written on it in a careful hand. Inside was a letter. Short, clear. Inheritance is not land or money. It is the courage to walk alone when the path demands it. If you are reading this, you already have everything you need. I folded the letter, my throat tight. My father stood with effort. I won't ask you to visit, he said. Or to remember me kindly. Just don't let this place become what I was. He left before I could respond. He died 11 days later. The funeral was small. Quieter than my parents' anniversary had been. I stood at the back again, not out of fear but habit. Clara was there. She saw me, hesitated, then nodded. We didn't speak. When it was over, I didn't stay. I returned to the estate and burned the old family portraits in the fireplace that night. Not in anger, in release. Ash rose softly, disappearing into smoke, names and expectations dissolving together. In the months that followed, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter, not triumphant, not victorious. Free. I began mentoring quietly, investing in people, not appearances. I listened more than I spoke. The estate became a place of beginnings, not memories. Lauder returned. Not the sharp kind from the anniversary hall, but the honest kind that didn't measure worth. One evening, a young employee asked me, "Do you ever regret how it all happened?" I considered the question. If it hadn't happened, I said, I'd still be asking permission to exist. Years later, the jacket finally wore thin at the cuffs. I stitched it myself instead of replacing it. The fabric held, like I always had. On the anniversary of my father's death, I walked the vineyard at dawn. Fog rolled in low and quiet. I thought about the insult that started everything. The laughter, the judgment. I smiled. Because poverty was never the lack of money. It was the absence of choice. And I had built a life so rich in choice that even revenge had become unnecessary. I turned back toward the house, the estate alive behind me, the past finally silent. Not defeated. Finished. The fog lifted slowly that morning, like a curtain rising for a final act that no one else knew was coming. Sunlight broke through the vines, touching the earth with quiet authority. I stood there longer than usual, listening, not to ghosts, but to the sound of something complete. For years, my life had been defined by reaction, by proving, by answering a wound with structure and silence. But now there was nothing left to answer. That was when the letter arrived. No return address. Just my name written in a hand I hadn't seen in years. Clara. I didn't open it right away. I carried it through the house, set it on the kitchen counter, walked past it twice, then finally sat down. Some endings demand patience. I'm writing this from a place where no one knows who I used to be, the letter began. I work mornings. I clean my own apartment. I answer to people younger than me. And for the first time, I don't feel like I'm falling. I kept reading. I used to think power meant being chosen. Now I know it means surviving when you aren't. You didn't take my inheritance. You showed me how empty it was. The words didn't sting. They didn't soften me either. They simply settled. I won't come back. Not to the estate. Not to the name. This is my goodbye, and my thank you. There was no signature. Just silence at the bottom of the page. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside my grandfather's. 2 truths. 2 different paths. Both finished. That evening I hosted one final gathering at the estate. No press, no donors, no speeches. Just people who had built something from nothing, workers, students, families who had never been invited anywhere like this before. We ate under open sky. Laughed without measuring volume. Children ran between the vines, unafraid of breaking something priceless. Because nothing there was fragile anymore. As night fell, someone asked me to say a few words. I hadn't planned to. I looked around, at faces that didn't know my past, didn't care about my last name. Didn't see me as poor or rich or worthy or not. I used to believe, I said slowly, that revenge was about taking something back. They listened. But it isn't, I continued. It's about refusing to let what broke you decide what you become. The fire crackled. The estate breathed behind us. I was once told I was too poor to belong, I said. So I built a place where no one has to ask permission. No applause followed, just understanding. And that was better. Later that night, after everyone left, I walked through the house one last time, not to check locks, not to relive memories, but to say goodbye to the version of myself who needed this place to heal. I had already healed. The next morning, I signed the final papers. The estate would remain protected, preserved, but no longer owned by me. It would be placed in a trust. Managed collectively. Its future no longer tied to one name, one ego, one wound. Legacy, I had learned, rots when it's hoarded. I packed lightly. The jacket went with me. So did the letters. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the gates, the vines, the house that once defined everything I lost and everything I proved. Because power isn't buying back what rejected you. Power is knowing when to walk away without needing them to see it. Somewhere, far from anniversary halls and inheritance speeches, I would build again, not to be seen, not to be chosen, not to be remembered. But because I could. And that was the final revenge, not humiliation, not wealth, not silence, freedom. And this time, it was mine alone.